welcome to Photoshop for Beginners. Now, if you have Photoshop and you are following along, that's great. I would recommend that. But if you don't worry, this lesson is being recorded, and during the week we will email you a link to the YouTube channel that you can watch it on. I do suggest, though, if you don't have Photoshop, that you go to Adobe and start the free trial. It's only 7 days, but if you decide that you like Photoshop and you want to continue learning it, it's going to be $20.99 a month. And if you're a student, there's a whole separate discount. So yeah, I will send the link in chat for anyone who wants. Where's the chat? Okay. All right, so I guess let's start. Photoshop, just to preface a little bit, Photoshop is a very complicated program, and it's got a lot of different options and tools and different ways of doing different things, and it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So today, that's why we're starting with the basics. And don't worry, we'll get to all the interesting stuff like editing photographs and drawing in the future lessons, and today might not be as exciting, but everything that I'm going to show you is necessary because you'll be using these tools all the time. If you have a question, feel free to ask or type it into the chat, and I will try my best to get to all of your questions today. But there's a number of things that I want to go over with you in the time that we have, so I apologize if I don't get to your question. You can always email it to me and I will get back to you during the week before our next lesson, or just remember it and I will answer it at the beginning of the next class. And if I'm talking too fast, just tell me that I'm talking too fast in the chat and I will slow down. I apologize in advance. I just want to make sure that I get to everything. Okay, so let's get started. I will share my screen. Okay. 1 second, I want to pull up the chat on my monitor just so that I can see if anybody has any questions. Okay. So when you open up Photoshop, you're going to come to this page. Down here are all of your recent projects. And over here, we're just going to start by clicking Create New. And this document is going to pop up. So on the right over here are all of your presets. So your dimensions, what you're measuring the page in, and you can customize it. You can set it to whatever number you want, and you can title it whatever you want. Or you can go up here to the categories, let's say photo or art and illustration. And when you click on View All Presets, whichever one you click on, if you notice, the measurements on the side here are all changing. For right now, just because we're starting out, we're going to do a custom 8.5 by 11 inches with a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. Let's just click Create first, and then I will quickly explain to you what pixels per inch means. A very brief explanation. We're not really going to go into pixels that much today, just because it's kind of complicated, and I don't want to start with that and overwhelm you. So let's click Create, and this is going to be what your interface looks like when you do that. So really quickly, to explain pixels, I am going to open up a photograph of these flowers. So because I have these rulers up here, you can see that this image is 4 inches by 6 inches. An image is made up of a bunch of pixels, which are little squares that are all different colors. And when you zoom out, if the resolution is high enough, you can't even see those little squares because the human eye just physically can't see it. However, if we zoom in and we keep zooming in, we zoom in really far in, you can see all of these little pixels that are different tones of the same color that make up this flower, for example, and that kind of fade and make up this background. So I'm just going to fully zoom out. Oops. And I'm going to drag down these guides really quickly just so that I can show you what pixels per inch really means, because I can just say pixels per inch and you'll be like, yeah, okay, amount of pixels in an inch, but I fully didn't understand this when I first started, so I'm going to do my best to explain it to you. So every inch of this grid is made up of 24 inches. Every inch has 300 pixels in it. And that means that this, like, one square has 300 little squares in it that make up that one square. So in this entire photograph, there are 3,000 pixels. 300 times 6, 300 times 4, and you get 3,000 pixels. So that's literally what pixels per inch means. I know it seems very obvious, but I don't know, for me, I'm a visual learner, so I think it's easier to see all of these squares. Don't worry if you didn't understand that. I explained it the best way that I could, but we'll go back to pixels later. And hopefully you'll get it a little bit later. Okay. So this is your interface. On the left over here are all of your tools. We're going to be learning about a couple of them this lesson and about a couple of them next lesson as well. So here are your tools, and on the side over here are your panels. Today we're going to go over the layers panel, which is right over here, and the properties panel, which is over here. They're the two most used panels in Photoshop. If they're not open for some reason, like if you're following along on Photoshop and it doesn't open for you, you just go to Window and find the panel here. There's layers and properties. Just make sure there's a little check mark next to it. So let's turn our attention to the layers panel really quickly, because layers are extremely important in Photoshop. I've learned that the hard way, but by not organizing my layers and then just running into so many complications later on. So if you think of layers kind of like a painting, if anyone here paints or draws, every layer of paint that you put on top, like every single layer of paint, the one that's on top is going to cover what is underneath it. So if you have like 5 different layers, if you go down here to the little square with the plus sign in it, and you just add 5 layers, this layer is going to be above everything else. And if you want it to be underneath, you kind of just keep dragging it down and dragging it to where you want it to be. Make sure you keep your layers organized. If you want to rename a layer, you double click and you type in whatever you want. If you want to delete a layer, this little trash icon, Photoshop will ask you if you're sure, and you just click yes. So I'm just quickly going to delete everything. Now we're going to go to the Move tool, which is the first tool up here. You use it to, like it says in the title, move things or select them. Right now, if we try to move this paper, which is all we have, Photoshop will tell me that I can't do that. The reason for that is because this background layer is locked. To unlock it, all you have to do is click on the lock icon and it turns into a layer. If you want to lock a layer again, you click the little lock icon up here. When you lock a layer, you just can't edit it. You can't do anything to it. So right now, because I unlocked it, I just take this layer and I can move it. It's just a white piece of paper. Okay. So to be able to use the Move tool and fully understand it, we have to use it with other tools. So let's go down to the Shape tool, which is the 3rd tool from the bottom. It's that little rectangle. Depending on what you have on your screen, it could be an ellipse or anything. We're going to start with an ellipse. So if you right-click, you'll see all of these different shape tools. So you just click on the ellipse tool, and you just click and you drag, and it creates a shape for you. Now, if you noticed, I didn't create a new layer when I made a shape. Whenever you create a shape, it automatically makes a new layer for itself, unless you tell it not to. So right now, let's just allow it to create a layer for itself, and here is our shape. Now, if you click anywhere again, you can't actually do anything but create another shape, which is why we go back to the Move tool just to kind of set things in place. And now we can take it and we can move it around. Now we have this black circle on a white rectangle. So let's turn to the properties panel over here. The properties panel changes depending on the tool that you're using. So since we're using a shape tool, over here is its width, its height, its orientation on the page, the X and the Y, although all you can really have to do is just move it and those pixels will change. And then the shape details underneath. So let's change the color. Let's go to this square. You can either decide not to give it a color by clicking on this white box with a red line through it, your recently used colors if you have any, or down here are a lot of your kind of already made colors for you. Pastel, light, dark, darker, so on and on. Or you can just go to this little color wheel on the upper right-hand corner, click it, and you get your little color wheel. This bar is your color rainbow. So you kind of just find what you want to, what color you want. If you want blue, just kind of click anywhere and then choose a color depending on where you are. If you want the most saturated color, you go to the upper right-hand corner. Make sure it's all the way in the upper right, and I'd say drag it out a little bit more past the corner. If you want a white, like the whitest white, you go up here. The black is black, you go down here. You kind of just pull it. Let's say I want to do green. I'm feeling green today. So press OK, and here is my circle. The next rectangle next to it is your stroke. So if you click it, it's the same exact thing. You go back here, you find what you want your stroke to be. Let's say I want it to be this blue. I click OK. And it looks as if I didn't even add a stroke. But you can see over here, the stroke is blue. That's because the pixel is not big enough. So we can't really see it. If we zoom in like really, really far, then we will be able to see it, but you can't right now. Whoops. So you just type in what you want. 5, you can kind of see that a little bit more. Let's go with 10. There, you can see that more. It's still not, let's go 15. Okay, that's better. And over here is your stroke. There are a couple different options. I believe you can download other strokes from online, but I've just never used this like often enough. But you can do a solid stroke, there's a dashed stroke, a dotted stroke. Yeah, and these path operations I will explain a little bit later when we're learning to combine shapes. So here's our circle. Now I'm going to show you something else, but for that I think I'm going to have us make a rectangle just because it's easier to see it since it's not completely even. So let's go to the shape tool. Let's right click, click on the rectangle, and let's make a rectangle. So this rectangle became green and blue because I already had that set. I already had those colors set in, and you can change them whatever you want. Right now, because I want us to work with the rectangle and I don't want this circle to bother us, you can hide layers. So since they're both on separate layers, all you have to do is click on this eye icon in the layer that you want, and it just turns it off. It doesn't delete it, it's still there. So I'm actually going to lock this layer really quickly just in case. I don't want to accidentally move the background. So I have this rectangle. And over here, you can see its width is 1,548 pixels and its height is 884 pixels. Let's say I want it to be wider. I want it to be 2,000 pixels. I'll just change it and it changes its width. However, I'm going to undo. So to undo, you go up to Edit and go Undo Move, or Control Z. And I would suggest getting used to pressing Control Z because you're going to be pressing Control Z a lot. So I'm going to do Control Z. Oh, and Control Z again. If I want to make the width 2,000 pixels, but I want the height to remain proportional, I'll go over here to the properties and I'll click this link chain icon in between. So I click it and I changed the width to 2,000. And the height changed with it. Once again, if I want to just change the height, I deselect, and then I change the height on its own. Now, there's a much easier way to do that. I mean, unless you know the exact dimensions that you want your rectangle to be, most people just kind of eye it. So I'm going to undo, and I'm going to go to Edit, Transform, and here I'm going to go to Scale. Now, this box kind of appears around the square, and it's very simple. You just click on any box and you scale it, and you can do whatever you want with it. Now, if you want it to remain proportional, all you have to do is press it and then click Shift, and it snaps into place, and the proportions are going to stay the same. And it's the same thing if you're creating an ellipse and you want it to be a perfect circle. You just click Shift and it's going to be a perfect circle instead of you having to do it manually. It just saves a lot of time. And even if you go to these side dots instead of the diagonal ones, you can still press Shift and it's still going to stay proportional. Right? If you're happy with this, you go up here and you press the check mark. If you're unhappy, you press the circle with the line through it. So let's say I'm happy with it. Here's my rectangle. Now let's go back to Edit, Transform, and Rotate. Same box appears, but now you can rotate it. And you can see that that little black box next to your cursor tells you the degree to which you're rotating your rectangle. So I'm going to make it 0 again. And let's say you want it to rotate exactly 45 degrees. You can manually do it and try to get it exactly at 45, but that's super annoying. So instead, you once again hold Shift. Shift kind of just sets things in place. So you take it and you click Shift, and it sets right away to 15 degrees, 30 degrees, 45 degrees. And it just keeps going like that. So let's say I wanted it to be at 45 degrees. I'm happy with it, so I click the check mark or press Enter. And now let's go back there. Let's go back to Edit, Transform. And honestly, Photoshop is a lot of trial and error. So I'm not going to teach you every single button and exactly what every single button does. I'm just going to teach you where to find all of this. And then that way you can go in on your own and experiment with it. So I'm not going to show you any more of these. I am going to show you Warp just because I love using it and I think it's super fun and I use it all the time, especially with photographs. When you click Warp, you get this new kind of box around it with these dots that kind of split each side up into thirds. So when you take a dot and you drag it, it warps. It does exactly what it's called. It warps the shape. These dots aren't actually just random dots, they're lines. So just keep doing that, just play around with it. You can even press in the middle on the shape and kind of drag it. You know, just do whatever you want to it. And I personally love this tool because I get to, I just get to really play around with photographs are really fun. I'll teach you how to do that in some of the future lessons where we can, for example, elongate the neck and still make it look realistic, but more surrealistic, you know? So that's always really fun. So let's say I like it, I press the check mark, and here's my shape. Now, for the most simple things, when we go to Edit, Transform, like Scale and Rotate, you can actually just do Free Transform, which is up here. That's Control T, or Command T, for those of you using Macs. Sorry, I always forget. Just like undo is Command Z. So I'll press Control T or Command T. Make sure that your layer is selected or else nothing's actually going to happen. To select a layer, you either press on the object the layer's in, or you just press on the layer itself. Press Control or Command T, and you get that same box. And now you can both scale it and rotate it at the same time. So that's Control T. And I'd say play around with all the other things, the perspective, distorting it, skewing it. You can flip it, rotate it exactly 90 degrees clockwise. It's just a quick little, just like a quicker way to do it than just rotating it manually. Okay, so that's transforming. So now we're gonna go to combining shapes. I'm going to turn off this rectangular layer and turn my ellipse layer back on. I'm going to get rid of the stroke because that can get a little bit confusing. So here's my circle. Now I'm gonna go back to the shape tool down here. I'm going to right click, click on the ellipse. And remember how I said that every single time that you draw a shape, it goes on its own layer, like so? You don't have to do that. So let's say you want to combine a couple shapes instead of making a bunch of different layers and then trying to combine those. That can just get a little bit confusing. So what you would do when you have your shape tool selected, your toolbar up here, which has a lot of the same presets as your properties panel, you go over here to this little square. And once you click on it, because this is selected, that is why the shape goes onto a new layer. Let's say we want to combine shapes. So let's click on combine shapes. And now we're going to draw our shape. And as you can see, it stayed on the same layer and it combined with the other one. So let's draw some more, just a couple more circles. Just do that. There. Now we click on our move tool just so that everything can set itself in place. And now if you move it around, it's all one layer. So it goes the same exact thing for all the rest of them. You go back to the ellipse tool, you go up here to the square, go down one, subtract front shape. Click on that. Oh, so because this last circle was selected, you always have to keep that in mind. Just do undo back. Just because it was selected, that circle was affected. So just once again, go to the move tool, press anywhere else just so that everything kind of resets. Press on your shape, go to your ellipse tool, and there, it's not selected this time. So once again, we'll go up there, subtract front shape, and once you draw the shape, it's not a white circle, it's a circle cut out. So that's just the background. So you just keep going, doing your shape. Now, if you want to make a perfect circle, if you see the cursor right now has a little minus sign next to it. That means it's subtracting the front shape. If you press Shift before you actually press with the cursor, that minus is going to turn into a plus. And that means it's just going to add the shape instead. It's just a little shortcut. Just make sure that you press with the cursor first and then click Shift. And then it'll be a perfect circle that will subtract. So that's adding and subtracting shapes. Let's go back to the move tool. Let's click anywhere else just to make sure that no shapes are selected this time. Select the ellipse shape again. And go to the shape tool. Let's go up here. And let's skip over this one and go down to exclude overlapping shapes. So for this one, let's make a circle over here. And once I let go, it excludes the overlapping shape. It takes it away. And you can do that wherever. This one is just going to subtract it because that's the overlapping shape. And there we go. So that's kind of how that works. Now, the reason that I skipped over the one before was because it's very confusing when there's a lot of shapes already involved. So right now I'm just going to turn off the eye really quickly, make a new layer. Oh, I actually didn't have to, so I'm going to delete that. Just so used to it at this point. Click on the shape tool, make a new shape. And now I am going to go back to this shape, go up here to this little square, go to intersect shape areas, and now I'm going to draw my circle, and that's what it does. It's only the part that intersects that is in color. So the reason I didn't show it to you on the other one, and I will show you why right now, is because when I try to do that, intersect shape areas, all of this that we already have is considered one shape. And that means that whatever new shape I make, like here, only this is going to be intersected, because it doesn't register that all of these different circles are different shapes of their own. So I'm just going to do undo, Control or Command Z, whoops, and go back to my move tool. Now, I said I was going to go back to this area right here, these path operations. If you honestly just click on the shape tool and you go up here and you look at what these shapes are, these are all the same, these path operations, and they go in the same order as well. Combine shape, subtract, intersect, and exclude. So let's say I want to go to combine and I make a circle right here. Oops, make a circle right here, and it combines. I can go over here and let's say press this one, and instead it will subtract, or press this one, and instead it will exclude. So that's just, in Photoshop, there are like at least 2 or 3 different ways of doing everything. And sometimes you don't know that there are, and sometimes you do, and it's just, it can be helpful. So yeah, that's that. Now, if we go to this little black arrow that's right above your shape tool, and we click on it, that's the path selection tool. So what this tool does, because all of these circles are now one full shape, you can't just take a circle and decide to move it. Like, let's say I don't like where this circle is placed, and I want it to be over here instead. I can't do anything about it because this is already one shape, and it's all on one layer. But if you go to this little black arrow up here, it's called the path selection tool, you right away see that all of these circles appear. So right now, this is the circle that is chosen. Let's say I wanted to move this circle. I click on the path, and you can see that it's selected. And now I can just take it, and I can move it to where I want it to be, just like that. And if I like it over there, I go and I click on a different circle. I don't like where that one is. It's a little bit awkward, so I'm going to move it up here, like that. And once again, when you have your path selection tool, well, selected, you can go over here to these shapes and choose if you want them to be combined, if you want it to be excluded. So it kind of just helps you edit everything that you've already combined. Now let's click on our move tool. Let's go back to this black arrow, but let's right-click this time and go to the little white arrow that's underneath it. That's the direct selection tool. So this tool is a little bit cooler, I would say. Let me zoom in really quickly. So to zoom in, you have the zoom icon at the very, very bottom. So if you click it, over here you choose the plus sign or the minus sign, and you can zoom in. Over here you can click fit screen, and it will fit the screen, or fill the screen. Let's go back to fit screen. I usually use a shortcut, because if I have a tool selected like I just did with the direct selection tool, I don't want to go and click on a different tool. I want that tool to still be selected and just be able to zoom in. So you would just click Controller Command plus and just zoom in. Same thing with Controller Command minus, and that's to zoom out. If you want it to just fit on the screen, it's Controller Command 0. So let's zoom in, and it zooms into the middle right away, but my shape is up there. So to get there, I can, of course, either move this arrow up and get to there, or I can just, another quick shortcut, press the spacebar. If you look at my cursor right now, it goes from the arrow to the hand when I press the spacebar, and you just hold the spacebar down and you move this sheet up to where you want it to be. Just some quick little shortcuts. We're just going to keep doing this. I know this might seem like a lot, but once you get the hang of, doing Control Command Z or Control Command plus minus, it all becomes a lot easier. and plus you don't waste time. So that's always a plus. So you go to this shape that is selected. So with the little black arrow, you could move it wherever you want it to. With this little white arrow, you can kind of take any of these points. Oh, that's still moving it. You can take any one of these points, and these two lines appear, and you can stretch them, and you can kind of morph and warp this shape. There. Now, sometimes Photoshop will give you a little notification telling you, oh, hey, what are you doing? This is a shape and you're kind of like making changes. Are you sure you want to do this? Just click yes. It just means that you can finally edit this shape. And then also with this one, you can just click on the path. Click on the path. And you can just make it whatever you want, go as far as you want. Just move it over like that. And if you're happy with it, you can just click enter or the move tool. With this shape as well, you can go over here and combine the shapes. It's the same exact thing. So let's go back to the excluding shapes, but let's say you want to move this over now. You can't with this tool. It gets confused. So you would just go back over here, right click, click on the path selection tool, and you can move that same shape. So all of these tools kind of help each other. Yeah, so there's one other tool. Let's click on back to the move tool and just click anywhere. Control Command 0 to fit it to the screen. We've got this cool like abstract piece coming along. I don't know why that keeps popping up. I apologize. Now there's another thing that you can do to shapes. If you go over here, right above this T tool is this pen. So let's click on it. Let's right click and just make sure that the pen tool at the very top is selected. And so what this does, you just get to draw your own shapes instead of making already ready set shapes and then kind of molding them. So let's make sure that our layer is selected. And you just click anywhere, you just get this dot, you click somewhere else, it forms a line. So it's kind of like that. And let me zoom in really quickly, just so that you can see. This shape isn't complete until I go back to the first dot, and right next to my cursor, a little 0 appears. So I'm just going to click there, and now this is a full shape. And it's the same exact thing. If we go back up here to these squares, it's set on combine shapes. If you click subtract front shape, it will make a little pie slice, and so on. And so you can just keep doing that wherever you want to. You don't have to make triangles. You can make like anything you want there. And with the path selection tool, it's the same exact thing. It now counts as a shape that you can move around. And with the direct selection tool, you can edit it even more and however you want. So let's click on the move tool, click somewhere else. This is what we have so far. So let's go back to the pen tool. Let's right click, and we're going to skip the second one and go to the curvature pen tool. So let's click on that. Let's once again zoom in a little bit. Let's go over here. There's not much being done here yet. So with the curvature pen tool, it starts out very similarly. You make a dot. Oh, sorry. I don't have a layer selected. Always make sure your layer is selected. So let's go here. You make a dot, it forms a line. And now the next dot that you make, it curves the line. And you decide how you want it to curve. You go another one, and let's say you go up here. It just automatically curves everything. And before you fully let go, just keep editing it. Oh, my layer wasn't selected again. I apologize for this. I'm going to delete all of that and just do that one more time. Make sure my layer is selected. And gonna make that shape again. There we go. Even now, I've been studying Photoshop for several years, and I sometimes still also forget to select my layer. Yeah, it's just something that you need to get used to. And so here's my shape, and you can do the same exact thing, exclude it, combine it, subtract, whatever it is that you want. I like how the exclude one looks. And go back to the direct selection tool. You can move it around, do what you must, do anything that you like. And I just suggest you make a bunch of shapes and just experiment, just play around with it. We're going to keep using the shape tool next class, but in a little bit of a different way. We're going to start working with photographs as well. So don't forget about the shape tool, but we are basically done for now. Does anyone have any questions before I continue? Okay, I'm gonna take that as a no. Okay, so I'm going to turn off this layer for now, and I'm going to make a couple more shapes just so that I can teach you something about layers.
If you have any questions, if you have any questions, press the raise hand button.
Or put them in the chat.
Okay, so I'm just gonna keep going. Okay, so I have the shape tool selected, and I'm just going to draw a circle. I will draw another circle that will be on a whole separate layer. I will draw another circle there. Now, to select one or more layers, so I'm going to give all of these shapes a different color just so that it's easier. Let's go with pink and green. So now you can see I'm going to go to my layers. I will rename these layers just so that it's easier for me. Blue, remember, double click, change the name, green, just so that I know that I'm working with these 3 layers. To select all 3 layers, there are several ways of doing that. So the first thing you can do is click on a layer and then click just go and move it all around, even when they're not all on one layer. Or you can, if let's say the blue, let's say I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to turn my rectangle from earlier on as well, like that. If the blue is all the way at the top, so if you see I take that layer and I move it all the way to the top, so even if I move it over the rectangle, now it's above it. But I want to select the blue and then the pink and the green. And I don't want this rectangle or this ellipse to be selected. I can't press on the green and then press shift and go to the pink and then press shift and go to the blue, because everything in between that is going to be selected. So what I want to do is I can just actually press on the shapes here. So blue, shift, pink, shift, green. And now you can see that the 3 of those are selected. There's one other way that you can select it. Let's say this is over here and this is here. With the move tool, I can just click and drag, and everything that gets in its way becomes selected. So the ellipse got in its way as well, which is why it is selected. And if I didn't want that, I can kind of just go like that. What ellipse is this? Okay, I will just turn that off for now. We can just do that, and all of the things that are there are selected. So there's 3 different ways to do that. So I'm going to turn this rectangle off. I'm going to select all 3 of these. I'm actually going to move these a little bit over each other. Now I'm going to select all of them in whichever way. And now I can combine them in a different way as well. So I can either I can right click on one of the layers and press either merge shapes, or I can go to layer and I can go down here to combine shapes. And once again, These are the same exact things that we were just working with, the unite shape, subtract front shape. This is the third way that you can do that exact same thing. So let's say I want to unite all the shapes, and they unite and become the color that was at the very top. So if we undo, because the blue was on top, they're all going to unite and become blue. If I want the pink to be on top, I'll just take the pink layer, move it on top, select it all, go to Layer, Combine Shapes, Unite Shapes, and everything turns pink. So just keep that in mind. And once again, you can do the same exact thing. Go to these arrows, and you can see all the shapes, and you can work with them, you can edit them. Now there's one more thing that I want to teach you about undo, and then we're going to call it a day. Whenever you do anything on Photoshop, over here, if you see this arrow with the 3 squares, you kind of press it, and if you extend it, this is your history. So it's the same thing as it is online when you go to your history and you can see everything that you searched up. These are all of the moves that you made. So if you click on any of them, it goes back to that point in time that you had, no matter if you deleted layers, no matter if you, I don't know, if you drew something on top of it, it doesn't matter, it kind of just goes back. And if you just press delete, you're going to delete that state that was selected. So this is just the quicker way of doing things, because sometimes if you keep pressing undo and just keep going and going and going, at a certain point it's going to stop because there's nothing to do anymore. But yeah. Oh, there's a raised hand. You can just unmute yourself.
Yeah, I had a question because when you merged those 3 circles, they became the same color. And I was wondering, like, could you have a merged image, like each circle had a different color, or is that not possible?
So when you merge them, they become one shape. And
yeah,
because they become one shape, unless you add a gradient over it, which I am going to go over next week, actually, so just hold that thought. It can go from one color to another, but you can't just have one color turn into another solid color. There has to be kind of a transition in between the two.
And could you have like an image that is both 3 circles like combined but not the same color? Like have that be a same figure, or is that not possible? Like,
can you repeat the question?
Sorry, like have these circles like in a same, to be a same shape, but all the 3 circles be a different color.
Then you just don't combine them. I mean, you can move them around and it doesn't matter if they're combined or not. They're going to be different shapes. Just make sure they're on different layers so that you can edit them separately. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, no problem. So that's going to be all for today. Does anyone have any other questions that I can help answer? RGB. Don't worry about RGB yet. We're going to go over that when we start talking about photographs. Because just very loosely, RGB stands for red, green, blue. And those are the 3 primary colors in Photoshop. I know the primary colors are usually red, blue, yellow, but when it comes to a photograph, most of the colors that you see are made up of red, green, and blue. And it sounds a little bit confusing, but that's what it is, and I am going to show you how to manipulate all of that later on in the 3rd or 4th lesson. Yeah, no problem. Okay, does anyone else have any more questions before I let you guys go? Okay, I'm going to stop sharing. How do I stop sharing? Sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay. Is that a raised hand or
No, sorry, it was like from the other question. Thank
Okay,
you.
no worries. Okay, well, thank you everyone so much for attending. Next lesson, I also apologize about my camera. I'll get it fixed for next time. But next lesson, we are going to learn how to put photographs into shapes. You know, how you see a lot of those like greeting cards or posters where there's a circle and then there's like a family in the circle and they're having a good time, but in the background it's completely different. So we're going to learn how to do that. And also we're going to learn about a couple other tools and how to use them in photographs. Yeah, that are also really fun to use, and how I mentioned earlier, the warping of the neck. How like sometimes I do that when I work with photographs and make it a little bit more surrealistic. I'll teach you how to do all of that and still make it look real-ish. Okay, well, I hope that everyone has a great rest of their day, and I'll see you next week.